It's the TEH Podcast, episode number 250, with Leo Notenboom of AskLeo.com and Gary Rosenzweig of MacMost.com. This week, new Apple stuff. Data collection is maybe not so scary. Are passkeys evil?
250. Can you believe we've done 250 of these things?
Wow. Yeah, I know. It's years worth of it. I mean,
It's pretty
6 years almost.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't even claim that this was necessarily a COVID thing, a pandemic thing. We were actually doing it before. So
I know. Yeah.
anyway, so
Yep.
what's new and exciting for our 250th episode?
Well, on my side of things, Apple, of course, had their big worldwide developers conference. And for the 20th year in a row, I did not attend. No, I've never been there, actually. It's hard to get in. There's a lottery and everything, and I don't do that much development work that I need to go to a conference about it. So,
Right.
but they did do the big announcement, which is where all the news comes from, really. No new hardware announced. Apple really, has gotten away from announcing any new hardware at worldwide developer conferences. They just announce that when it's ready, and they focus on development, which means it's when they introduced all their new operating systems and
Right.
start with the beta process. So it's this whole little, like, it's beta season. We get the Worldwide Developers Conference, we get the betas on the same day for developers and public betas, and then the real thing comes out for everybody in the fall. Um, was interesting this year is they changed the naming scheme, widely predicted to happen. So instead of having, Mac OS 16 and iOS 19 and all this, they are going to go with the year thing, a year ahead thing. So it's 26. Everything's 26. Mac OS 26, tvOS 26, watchOS 26, and all of that.
Well, we're
Uh,
good that way for at least another 75 years.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's and I think I mean, everybody kind of predicted it. It's kind of got to go that way, especially when you get like iPhone numbers and iOS numbers are confused, and it's a whole thing. So, yeah, it makes sense to me that they do that. So there's that. They still, I thought when they did it, they're not going to use names anymore for macOS, because macOS is the only one that they actually give it a name. But they did. It's called macOS Tahoe. I really thought they would just say, well, it's macOS 26. We're not doing the name nonsense anymore. But no, they made a whole big deal about it, like they always do with a little video and everything, showing how they picked Tahoe, or not the real story, but you know,
Sure.
um,
The
the
marketing story.
yeah. So we have Tahoe, and then all of this, they also, it was a good time for them to start with the unified numbering system, because they also introduced design changes that are across all the systems, which is really the first time they've ever done that. Usually they'll introduce a new design element in some system, and if it works out, then it slowly gets introduced into the other systems. And you've got things like, iOS leads the way, and then Mac OS has something new, and that goes over to the iPad, which then goes to iOS. It just goes all around. And I guess the last time for that really was to introduce a kind of a glass-like look for Vision OS for the Apple Vision Pro. And now they're kind of bringing that to all of the operating systems at once. So they're all in sync, like all the same kind of design elements across all the platforms with a unified numbering system, which is nice. And that's not the only thing that they really brought over, because they actually, surprisingly, the biggest single change to any operating system that they announced um, was for the iPad.
Huh.
And it was in a weird direction, because, the iPad has it's this weird thing. It's between the iPhone and the Mac. It's got all these things that look like the iPhone, because it's like a mobile device.
Right.
But it's got a bigger screen, and they have really been pushing people to get keyboards with it nowadays. So it's got a lot of desktop-like features. Some of the desktop apps, big apps like Photoshop and Final Cut Pro and all that, are on the iPad. And so they introduced windowing on the iPad, which they've never had before. It's always been like you're either looking at the app full screen like you would on a phone.
Right.
There was a split view mode. There is a slide over mode, so you can have an app kind of in a corner. He says there are all these different ways of handling it, and they finally just went and said, no, you can do full screen, and then you could shrink it down, and it could be a window now. So you could have
Resizable. I
multiple
mean,
windows.
you
Yep.
get to choose any number, the whole bang, huh?
The whole thing looks like regular Windows. Matter of fact, it's got the three little colored buttons like Apple
Okay.
has
Yep.
on the Mac. It's got, the Windows tiling functions they introduced on the Mac. It looks extremely Mac-like. And with the new glass, liquid glass design going across all of them, it's almost like you could definitely do screenshots of iPad now and show them to people and say, Mac or iPad, and you would not be able to really tell a lot of times if
Interesting.
you're looking at the right apps and the right way and all that. And so, yeah, that is kind of interesting that they went that way. They basically the iPad seems to sometimes take a small step towards the iPhone, sometimes a small step towards the Mac, and now suddenly it took a big step towards Mac. Like
Right.
it's almost like, so why is there iPad OS? Like, couldn't they just run Mac OS on
Right.
an
Right.
iPad? And yeah, obviously there's a lot more to it than just this windowing feature, but it
It's
does go
funny
across.
because
Yeah,
I did see a headline this morning that said something about so iPad as a desktop is a computer now.
yeah.
And now it makes sense that just with windowing, you're right. Windowing and a keyboard, you've got something that's pretty.
Yeah,
Can you
a lot of
use a
people
mouse
use
with it?
that as the definition,
Right.
right? Oh, it's a tablet if it's like apps are full screen, like mobile apps, and it's a
Right.
desktop if you get windowed, interfaces. And now the iPad has that. So if your definition of a desktop was that, now the iPad is that.
Can you
So
use
that's going to be
a
interesting.
mouse with it?
Yeah, oh yeah, you already could. I mean, you
I figured you
already
could. Yeah. Yeah.
Apple has already been pushing for years, the little keyboard and the keyboard it has a trackpad on it.
Okay.
Apple's really trackpad centric, but you could certainly do a mouse instead if you wanted to. So they've already had that. And there's been plenty of people I have noticed we've gone fully from, the iPad originally didn't have any keyboard with it. Like you get a third-party Bluetooth keyboard and
Right.
connect it. And then there were third-party like designed for iPad keyboards. And then Apple came out with their own keyboards. And we've are getting to the point now where I'm getting questions from people that makes it obvious to me that they aren't even thinking of the iPad as a non-keyboard device.
Right.
Like they're asking me for keyboard shortcut advice, and I'm giving them Mac advice, and they're like, "Oh no, I'm sorry, I want an iPad." And I'm like, well, I mean, to me, it's like that would be, okay, this is an unusual thing, but I'm using a keyboard with my iPad. How do I do this? And it's not even occurring to them that that's unusual. It's like everybody is. And it's still, I did actually ask around, search around, and according to what I can find, a majority of iPad users still don't use it, don't use any kind of keyboard or trackpad
Right.
with it. But I think that if that's the case, and there's a lot of people out there that just, grab it as a quick, like, they watch Netflix, they just do some basic stuff. It's an
Right.
entertainment device, a screen to have, that's bigger than their phone. And then there's people that actually use it for work. I think we're at a point now where people that use it for work, like the vast majority, are probably keyboard trackpad on the iPad.
It's funny. I was doing some work on my car the past couple of days, and it was a classic case of, okay, I needed instructions. I found instructions on YouTube. My computer is here. My car is there. What's the
Yeah.
right way to get the video into to
Yeah.
where I need to work? And yeah, the iPad is perfect for that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yeah. I mean,
Don't need a keyboard for it, but
it's a very light, there's a weight difference. Even the MacBook Air comes in just it's like 2.5 pounds,
right,
right? Which feels, if you're old timers like us, that feels super light compared to, these bricks we used to carry around. But the iPad comes in at like a pound, like for a big screen iPad, and feels super thin. So yeah, I get the whole idea of like, doing a lot of travel soon, and I can look at it and say, boy, the it's really hard for me to justify carrying a MacBook with me when I'm trying to travel light. But an iPad might be interesting. Like
right,
the phone obviously is coming with, but
right.
like an iPad is so thin. I mean, I've got the padding and the on my backpack between my back and like the back layer is thicker than an iPad, at this point. So anyway, there's that. Mac OS, there's a bunch of little new features which it's hard to like focus on any one of them now, things like Spotlight's got all new functionality and how Spotlight works and things like that. I think from a power standpoint, there's one feature that is very powerful, which is the Shortcuts app now has automations. So the Shortcuts app can still do everything the Shortcuts app did before. You can make these little programs that do things, that interact with your apps, send messages, emails, rearrange files, all that. But before you had to trigger them. Now you can do things like set one to go at a certain time, or when an app launches, or when you connect to something via
Nice.
Bluetooth, or a million other little when a file is modified, it can automatically run these. So that's going to make things really powerful. That was already available on the iPhone, but I think it wasn't as powerful on the iPhone on a mobile device. On a desktop, I think it's going to be really powerful to
Yes.
have this ability. And I think it's the kind of thing where I can't even predict like how people are going to use this. Like I'm really interested to see 6 months from now the things, or not 6 months from now, 6 months from the release of Tahoe, like the things people will be asking me, like, can I do this with it? I'll be like,
Right.
oh yeah, that's a good idea. Um, so there's that. They did introduce clipboard history, which so now you can go back
Oh,
and like paste
nice.
the thing that you had, copied 5 times ago, which will be interesting to see how that changes the clipboard manager market, including my own Clip Tools
Sure.
clipboard manager, which does a lot of other stuff. I mean, obviously, I don't think the central focus of my tool was ever the
Right.
clipboard history.
It's funny because I've got the same situation on Windows. Windows has had clipboard history for some time.
Mhm.
Windows V for anybody listening, and if it's enabled in settings. And what I'm finding is, yes, I've got it enabled, and no, I never use it because I've got a third-party tool installed that gives me my clipboard history and a bunch of other things. So it's just one of those things to see what those third-party tools are really adding beyond just history.
Yep, exactly. So I'll have to see and think about where I want to go with that tool in the future. Um, So yeah. Oh, and the other thing is, I was trying to find a theme. Like, is there some sort of thing that Apple's really seems to be going for across all of these different systems? And besides the whole liquid glass redesign, there is there's a set of features that I call screening features that Apple seems to be introducing across apps like the phone app, the FaceTime app, and messages to basically prevent you from getting spam calls, spam
Oh,
messages, that
nice.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of different things to handle different situations. And for instance, like the big one on the phone, and I can't wait to try this. You should, if you receive a phone call, you could set it so that if it's from an unknown number, instead of it just saying, going right to voicemail and say leave a message, it could say, okay, state your name, and you're supposed to say your name, and then what is this regarding? And I don't know what verbiage is used to get those
Right.
things, but it converts those to text, and all happens before your phone rings.
Oh, uh-huh.
So then your phone rings, and the screen says call from unknown number. Here's the number, and they said their name is this, and this is about that, this thing. And then you could decide whether or not to answer it, send it to voicemail, whatever.
The downside of that one is that when you decide to decline the call,
Hmm.
the person calling knows that you declined the call.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they know there's a difference between it just going to voicemail or you actually doing something.
Mm.
I don't know if there's a different, like
Yeah,
I think I don't I don't get that many phone calls. I just don't even I don't take that many phone calls.
right.
But I'm pretty sure like I know there's one, like if you just press the side button on an iPhone, it silences the ring and it will still ring 4 times and then go to voicemail.
Hmm.
So they don't know whether you hit the button or not. So, and that's key to the whole thing. And
Right.
I assume, I think if I hit the voicemail button, that it does the same thing,
But
but
they've
maybe you've got
already
the
taken the
option.
time to answer questions, right? They've already
Yeah.
interacted with the system to say, here's my name, here's my reason.
Yeah.
Um, the assumption would be that that information that they just provided is being used by somebody to make a decision, right?
Yeah. I mean, but
And
if you're
when you
not
don't pick up
there,
the call, right?
yeah, but I mean, if I put my phone down and go for a walk, the same
Right,
thing happens.
right.
It doesn't, you don't know that the person is there for sure. or that they have their phone on or anything, you know. So yeah, I guess you can't make an assumption, but
It'll be
I
interesting. Yep.
like it's advice. And remember, it's for unknown callers.
Correct. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So like it's not like, oh, your best friend calls you and you didn't pick up and they're like mad. It's like, no, your best friend calls you. It's not going to do that. It's just going to ring normally. It's not going to
And
prompt
you're
them. It's
not going to
only
pick up and they'll be mad.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's interesting. And there's also like a hold feature too, where you can be on hold, and if there's music playing in the background,
Mhm.
you can actually put it in a mode where you're done, but your phone is still listening. And when it detects that the music is like somebody has picked up, it then alerts you somehow, and then you can pick the phone up. So you don't have to listen to the hold music.
Could have used that a couple of months ago when I was trying to do something with a bank, and I had so many calls and there was so much hold music repeatedly. It's like and hold music, it's evil. If
Yeah.
it's the exact same hold music every time you call, that's worse. All right,
Oh,
at least be
yeah.
entertaining.
Apple leaned into that actually because when they demoed that, they actually put in, they put in hold music that everybody could immediately identify as the worst, the most commonly used, but the worst. Like you would
Uh,
recognize it in a second, like, oh, that song. Oh my. And yeah, so they really leaned into whoever thought that they should put that song in the demo. That was perfect. Chef's kiss and all that. So yeah, so there we go. We got new stuff.
oh,
Developer beta now, public beta in July, and then it'll be released in the fall. And I'm guessing, Apple's been pretty good at getting the operating systems out about the same time, very close.
mhm.
And I'm guessing with all the numbers being the same and all that stuff now, and like a unified design, that they're going to also release everything at the same time.
That'd be
Uh,
nice.
yeah, that would be nice. But I have it running the developer beta on my laptop, and while there are a couple of features that probably don't work. Like if there's polling in messages. Like in messages, you can go and start a little poll, like in your group
Oh,
chat.
right. Yep.
And I'm guessing that it's not going to work uh, to people with older versions.
Right.
But for the most part, the stuff seems in this update to be pretty compatible. Like things look different. For instance, a feature of the Reminders app is you could put a bunch of stuff on a list in the Reminders app, and then you already can make sections and divide things up into sections. So you make a packing list. You can already say like clothes, toiletries, electronics, and all that. You can now just put the list and then say categorize for me, and it will use AI and figure out what the category should be. That I don't see any incompatibility with an older system. Like if I look at that same list now in Reminders, an older system, it doesn't know that I used AI for it. It just sees them as sections. There's a lot of stuff like that. So I think it's the kind of thing where it's going to be a pretty smooth beta period, like using various versions of operating systems and things.
Cool.
Yeah,
So, in other news, I ran
yeah.
across an article this morning from 404 Media,
Hmm.
which is actually a really cool independent news media. Airlines don't want you to know they sold your flight data to DHS. Basically, if you've flown or if you're about to fly, Gary, uh, your your itinerary, your identity, of course, and apparently even like which credit card you used, it's all information that is being collected by a third party that is owned by, I think, three of the major airlines, but used by most of them.
Mm.
They're a data broker, and they then have turned around and have been selling that to Department of Homeland Security, and I think ICE is using it now too. So, yeah, that's both disappointing and not surprising, which leads me to kind of sort of segue to data collection in general, because one of the things that I hear from readers and viewers a lot is that there is a class of people that will never, ever, ever put anything in the cloud.
Mm.
They will never store a document in OneDrive. They will never put something in iCloud because they are convinced that their documents are being scanned by the authorities for nefarious content and or just or invasion of privacy. And there's some legitimacy to the concern because I think iCloud had been, if they haven't already, scanning uploads for child abuse. CSAM, I think it is.
No, no, that's not
Not
how
anymore?
that. Well, they never implemented the system,
Okay.
but it was a hash-based system.
Understood. But
So they weren't scanning your stuff.
yeah,
They were they were sending your device the hash.
but here's the thing, right? To a user,
Yeah.
it looks like their images have been scanned, right?
Yeah, even though that's not
Haven't
true. Yeah.
been, right?
Mm,
But their information was hashed, I guess,
mm,
or compared against a hash or whatever. Point being, though, that there's a fair amount of paranoia around sharing data with the major providers like iCloud and Dropbox and OneDrive and Google Drive and all that, because the thinking is that these companies are turning around, scanning the information, and then selling the gleaned data or using
mm,
the gleaned data to train their own AIs. To me, for one thing, I don't fall into that camp. I don't care. I don't think it's happening. The fact that it could be happening. One of my phrases has always been, "You and I, we're just not that interesting."
yeah.
Um, but I think the greater risk, this particular article is just the tip of the iceberg of the greater risk, where some of the things that we just do even without using our own computers or without storing our documents in the cloud, so much of what we do is collected in databases in various places that are then collated and sold to data brokers who would then turn around and sell it to others. Um,
Hmm.
that seems to me to be the greater risk. And even worse, outside of like lobbying our representatives, there's not a hell of a lot we can do about it unless you're willing to completely go off grid, which literally would mean, not having credit cards, not flying, not traveling, not, any of the anything that has data as a side effect, which is everything these days. There just really isn't much we can do about it. Um, the only Most of these collections have these wonderful caveats that say, okay, fine, we your privacy is very important to us, and as a result, they say that they'll only provide it to authorized individuals, or in the case of government authorized subpoenaed government access. That's about the only place that I think things like cloud storage kind of overlap, because indeed, Google and Microsoft and Dropbox and Apple probably all have processes to be able to respond to subpoenas where people's information is requested by law enforcement. The theory, of course, is that there is a high bar, there's a high barrier, right? You
Hmm.
have to go to a court and get a subpoena, and they have to prove that there has, have to be reasonable cause and so forth. And I think that a lot of people may distrust that process even more lately. But like I said, there's another horse that's already out of the barn, and that's all this data that's already being collected, sold, and resold on us. Anyway, like I said, it seems like there's a fair amount of paranoia that is legitimate, but it's being targeted at the wrong things. Uh,
Yeah.
the thing that always amuses me the most is that uh, cloud storage, like OneDrive and so forth, you've got control. You can encrypt everything you upload, right? Unlike all of this other data that's being collected as you go about your day. So
Yeah.
anyway, I just wanted to comment on that particular story just because I thought it was an interesting, it's news, but it's not news.
Yeah, we've said many times before on this show that people are so worried about their phone giving their location to, say, Apple or Samsung or Google or wherever, completely ignoring the fact that AT&T or Verizon definitely knows where you are all the time
Yep.
and has that information there. And it's not that. whether or not Google or Apple or somebody knows, it doesn't matter because the government can just go right to AT&T and T and say,
it's
tell us
not
where this
Google.
person is.
Yeah, Google is not where law enforcement goes.
Yeah, yeah. The
They
phone
go to your
companies,
phone company. Yeah.
yeah, they are, and they're through their towers, they have all this information. So yeah, when your phone says like your location is being shared, that's like your phone has figured out where you are, so it can show you, say, on a map or whatever other app you're using, or when you take a picture, it can label it with the GPS. And your phone figures that out, and then an app is asked, "Oh, can I have that information?" And that's when you're giving permission. And that's when you're like worried, why does this app want my information?
Right.
Forgetting that before any of that happens, AT&T has basically like triangulated your location through how strong of a signal it has on each of its towers around
Just,
wherever you
I'm
are.
assuming that the telcos, AT&T, T-Mobile, et cetera, yes, triangulation is a thing.
Yeah.
My guess is they probably don't need it. They probably also have direct access to the GPS information anyway.
Yeah, I know. I think it's tougher, but I don't think it's even. I think in some cases it's completely overlapping because in some cases your GPS location is actually that's one of the main pieces of data being used in
Right.
addition to the actual GPS satellites,
Right.
and the Wi-Fi routers that
Yes.
are around you.
The
So there's
Wi-Fi.
all this information. But yeah, I mean, people often overlook that, and there's other places too. And the going back to the original airline story. I mean, um, part of the thing is for decades now. I mean, I remember this is something when I was a kid that we talked about, that you would get, say, a magazine subscription. Back before the internet, you would have to get information somehow. So you had magazine subscriptions, and it was almost like a fingerprint. Like a person would have, say, 7 or 8 magazine subscriptions, which did not seem like very much because if you didn't have the internet to read things, then you had newspapers and magazines. So getting 6 or 7 magazines a month was not that much information compared to what we have now. And it was like a fingerprint. The 7 magazines that you got that was like who you are. Did you get Astronomy Magazine, CQ, Newsweek, what Vanity Fair, all these different magazines, kind of like, but they all sold information to the other magazines. So you would get
Oh
this
yeah.
thing where you would get marketing from, like, if you subscribe to Astronomy Magazine, you would get a marketing thing from Sky and Telescope, no
Right.
doubt, right? Because all Sky and Telescope did is say, we want to send out 10,000 little mailers to get subscribers. And a marketing company says, we'll take care of that. And they go and say, well, we have a list of everybody that has Astronomy Magazine. Send them this. And this was sold back and forth. But what was interesting is at that time, it didn't seem like the government had caught on, or governments around the world had
Right.
ever caught on that they could just buy this information too. But definitely now it has, no
Yes.
doubt.
Yes.
So all this, when an airline says, "Hey, we could sell you like an address of somebody that travels a lot to, different vacation type places," and then that's why you end up getting little flyers in the mail from like Royal Caribbean or something like that,
Right.
because they bought this database that came originally from the data sold by United Airlines. And that's all fine, or fine or not for marketing purposes.
Right.
But then the U.S. government, the NSA or whoever goes and says, "Oh, wait a minute, that information, it's not even that expensive.
We'll buy a copy.
We'll take all of it. Here's a check." And then they add that into their computer database, as well as which magazines you subscribe to and your Facebook ad preferences and all that stuff. And they just throw that all into your database. And yeah, but it is funny to think that you could, I mean, it would even be considered something private. Like I think, TV shows and movies, it's always, the fugitive is on the run and they made a mistake. After 3 weeks, they used their credit card at this ATM and now we have them.
Right.
And it was like, oh, that one thing that they did. But I don't think anybody's under the assumption that if they book a flight on Southwest, that like somehow, you know, they can't be found or whatever, or nobody would know that, right? So,
Anyway,
yeah.
this week I also have a get off my lawn.
Oh, okay.
I have a grump. Um, Tell me if this sounds familiar. I don't understand it, therefore it's wrong or evil, or I don't like it, or no one should be using it. It's a conspiracy, etc., etc. I have been getting a steady stream of these kind of comments on my recent videos, specifically, not so much the articles, but mostly the videos, about passkeys. Now, passkeys, I get it. They're complicated.
Mm,
There's so much magic. And choose to use or not, that's fine. They're going to get pushed by a lot of the large corporations. The big entities like Google right now and Microsoft are both pushing passkeys relatively hard. The thing that sways me the most is that there's pretty much a strong consensus across the security community that passkeys are the way to go. But no, 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 because it's difficult to understand, because people aren't willing to watch the entire video, because people aren't willing to put their brain around the concepts. Like I said, it must be wrong. It must be evil. It must be a conspiracy. Um, I, it's wearing me down. I'm going to have to stop talking about passkeys less because it's frustrating. There's only so many times I can answer the question, and it's yeah, get off my lawn. And I think it also falls into the bucket of something we've talked about in the past. Uh, if it's not perfect,
mhm,
it doesn't solve every problem. If all of the edge cases aren't covered 100%,
mm.
the whole thing must be crap.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a lot of that in these discussions too. I'm seeing a lot of, what about with an edge case? What about with another edge case? Well, yeah, that's an edge case. It's an important edge case, but here's the scenario. And the other stuff, the non-edge cases, are way more important. Anyway, yeah, it's wearing me down.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff wears me down too. There's like too many to name. Like we could just do the whole show on the get off my lawn thing. But I did want to put one up there to match yours. Something that I heard a couple times in the last few days. Um, people people have problems with technology. Something's not working. Normal kind of thing, right? Um, but way too often people assume that if something's not working for them, that it's a bug and it's not working for everybody.
Right.
And it's the wrong assumption to make. And a lot of times this manifests itself in this isn't working. Oh, well, I'll wait for the next update to see if it fixes it. And it's like, yeah, but it's working for other people. So it's not, the next update is not going to fix it. I mean, maybe it will. Sometimes it does simply because you've restarted your computer after an update, right? And if
Well,
you would
there's
just,
something legitimately unique about your machine that is
yeah.
affected by the update. Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it just happens so often. The attitude that if it's broken for everybody, and we don't apply that to other simpler things. We don't think like, for instance, if our car is if your car is pulling a little to the left, you don't go and say, must be a problem with the Chevy, whatever. You think, no, that's not right. And you think that's a problem with my car. But on computers, for some reason, it's just always like that's happening. It must be happening to everybody. It's a problem with the system, not with my particular computer. So
At least do the tiniest bit of research to find out if other people are
yes,
experiencing.
and sometimes it's hard because one of the things I like to do is I'll respond with more or less saying it's not, it doesn't look like that for me, or it's working fine for me. And a lot of people take that as kind of like, I have to be very careful. They take it as like an offensive thing, like, wow, good for you that it's working for you. It says, no, no, no. I am offering you a data point.
Yes.
Like, this is the thing. You have found something wrong. If I said, oh, seems to be for me as well, maybe we confirm a few other people, then we know it's a universal problem. I'm saying, oh, it's not happening for me. So right away we can rule out that it's happening for everybody. It's not.
Right.
You go ahead and continue and find out maybe it's happening for half the people. Maybe it's you can ask 100 people and nobody else has this problem. But the one thing I can tell you very easily, is that it's not happening for me. And that, so I have to phrase it usually like, I
Of
usually
course.
say something, here's another data point for you. It's not, I don't see this problem happening. So it can't be happening for everybody. Hope this helps.
Well,
You
of
know,
course it's not working. Of course it's working for you, you big computer hotshot. You.
yeah, I'm not doing anything special. So
All right.
anyway,
Flip over to things that are cool.
yeah, so I saw instead of like the latest book or the latest movie or something like that, I actually came about a movie from 2 years ago in an interesting way. I did a video showing like Mac apps that are still around, like things that like you might have used 20 years ago on your Mac, and you forgot it's still there and just as useful as it was. Because I'm always getting people, I show something and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that was still there. I didn't know you could still do that or whatever." So I showed a list, and one of the things on that list that always gets people is the app called Stickies. People love Stickies. It's got almost like a cult following on Mac, and but there's a ton of people that for some reason, even though they claim to have loved it, they stopped using it a while ago. And when they find out it's still there, they're like so excited. I'm like, it never went away, so you just stopped using it. But anyway, one person actually said in a comment, "Oh, there's a movie where Stickies plays a major role." I'm like, what? There's a movie where the Stickies app on macOS plays a major role. So I almost just like responded with like, "Oh, cool, thanks," and then went away. But instead, I was like, "Well, let me just look up this movie just real quick to see what it is." And a trailer appeared, and the trailer started playing. And not only did I immediately see Stickies in the trailer, but like messages and FaceTime and like files and all like that was showing the Mac screen.
Right.
Okay, that's weird in the trailer. So I watched the whole trailer and I was like, this seems to be a movie. Like there was one back in 2018 that the entire movie is told from screens. You never have a camera on like the actual scene. It's
Interesting.
always there. And it was called, the movie 2018 was called Searching. And it turns out in 2023, a kind of spiritual sequel to it by some of the same people came out. And this movie is called Missing. And the movie is it turned out to be a really enjoyable movie. And really don't like thrillers that much, but this was really enjoyable. And the entire thing is on screens, a lot of it on a Mac screen by the main character's Mac screen. So she's constantly messaging, looking things up online, doing research. She's using stickies to save information, and you're seeing everything grow, like all these little stickies on the screen as she finds things, as she's trying to solve the mystery. And there's an urgency to it. She has to work with somebody in another country. She uses TaskRabbit. She's using FaceTime to talk, or WhatsApp, I think it was, to talk to the person. So you see them on the screen, then you see what he sees of her on the screen, and there's never a raw camera shot. Even at one point when they do have to venture out into the world, there's some sort of security camera system at a compound, and you're seeing the security camera, like 6 frame thing of the security camera of what's going on. So
Interesting.
it maintains this thing of the entire movie is shot on the screen. And the screenshots are incredible. Made me so jealous. Sometimes they zoom in on the screen so close, and I'm watching it in 4K. And I'm like, I don't know of any screen that will show that resolution of that corner of
Right.
like a window on Mac. So they must be doing something to get that amazing resolution from this. And it's riveting because it involves lots of cool stuff. Like there's for Google fans, she's constantly going into Google and she knows right how she's an 18-year-old who's obviously really good with computers, and she gets right into the security settings and tracking and all this stuff. And I didn't encounter any major mistakes. There were a few times things were bent, like, oh, she got lucky with that part. Or, oh, I don't know if it shows you quite as much information. But there was none of the typical like hacker sitting at a thing saying their password is probably their dog's name, that kind of situation, or like I could just install with this USB thing, none of that. It's all very realistic, and it's really fun to watch. Like I was totally immersed in the movie and not distracted by anything else going on while watching the movie. So I highly recommend it. And if you're a fan of Mac OS or just the stuff getting done on computers, it's just interesting to watch an hour and a half movie where an
One of
entire story plays out like this.
Another way that it's unique is that it's actually showing a production operating system on screen. Because I'm sure you've seen
Yeah.
this a lot, that most of the computer screens you see on TV shows and movies
Yep.
are mockers, right? They're
Right.
not they're a Mac-like operating system or a Windows-like operating
Yep.
system. The actual showing you an actual Mac
Mhm.
screen or an actual Windows screen or is rare.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. This is interesting. My only main complaint is that she uses Chrome. And I keep saying, why aren't you using Safari? Why are you using Chrome? What are you doing? But anyway, she's using Chrome. And but yeah, the rest of it, I mean, but you could see that it's Chrome. You could see that she's using Google. You could see she's using, different things. They don't try to make mask things.
right.
She doesn't go and say, "Oh, I'm sure glad I have my MacBook Pro with the Thunderbolt ports." She never says stuff like that. But they never try to hide it. She's just using it the whole time. So it's really cool. Anyway.
I actually, my wife and I stumbled onto something that just released on Netflix. It's called Department Q. It's a 9 episode series, hour-long episodes. It is, it's in one hand, it's the classic broken cop scenario where, this guy, he's damaged. There's some stuff that happens to him. He comes back to the job. They put him on cold case,
Hmm.
to give him something to do that shouldn't be too controversial. Needless to say, controversy ensues. Um, we're finding it the the characters are very, in a way, unlikable, but they're also very likable in that unlikable way. It's really hard to describe.
Hmm.
Um, and they certainly have no filters. And it's turning out to be a good mystery reveal. The comment we made last night, we think we just watched episode 4. Like I said, I think there's 9 episodes total. And we're still at that state where, they've done a really good job of making it look like it could be any of these people. So
Hmm.
they're basically revealing information as they go. Lots of interesting character interaction. Anyway, we're just enjoying it. Department Q, it's on Netflix right now.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like something I'd
It's,
like.
it's Brit, which is
Yeah.
another one of the other things that approach or appeals to us. The actual scenario is set in Scotland,
Yeah.
but the protagonist is from England, so there's a little bit of that kind of, I'll just say, rivalry going on. So it adds to the
Uh,
show.
that's good. I love British shows because then I get to play the side game of which episode of Doctor Who is this actor from?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. You'll recognize a number of people, and
Yeah.
quite possibly from Doctor Who.
Yeah. Cool. Blatant self-promotion. So I will point to my video that I did right after the Worldwide Developers Conference, where I try to really quickly, as fast as I can, right after they're done talking, get a video up on YouTube that tons of people will watch for a couple days and then nobody will watch ever again. But I'll point to it. I'll point to it now while people are still watching it.
Cool. And at the risk of encouraging more comments that will make me grumpy, I'm
Yeah,
going to
you
point.
you just promised you weren't going to do this, and now you're doing it.
So the reason this one is, it's an article I call Passkeys and Hardware Keys. There's, again, a lot of confusion around passkeys.
Sure.
And one of the pieces of confusion is, well, what's a YubiKey? Is a YubiKey, the USB hardware key, is that a passkey or not? And up until about a few weeks ago, I was saying, no, they're two completely different things. I was wrong. Some of them are actually capable of acting as passkeys.
Hmm.
So talk about the differences and why it might matter. And in this case, I think for most of our audience, I think have YubiKey hardware keys are probably overkill. But I think it is really interesting to understand the difference and how they do and don't work in this scenario.
Cool. All
So I
right.
think that's us for this week. As
Yep.
it turns out, we'll probably be off for a couple weeks here. Come back
Hmm.
sometime in July. Again, as always, thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you here again real soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The show notes for this week are at tehpodcast.com/TEH250. If you have a comment or question for us, be sure to leave it on the show notes page. The TEH Podcast is hosted by Leo Notenboom of AskLeo.com and Gary Rosenzweig of MacMost.com, and edited by Connie Delaney. I'm your synthetic announcer, Adam, from 11labs.com.